So last night we saw 6 Republicans ultimately join Democrats and pass this resolution that would repeal President Trump's tariffs, in particular when it comes to the tariffs levied against Canada. With this said, the measure now has to go to the Senate. If it does pass, which actually it looks like it may be likely to, it would end up on President Trump's desk and he would likely veto the measure. So this isn't expected to actually become law, but it does mark perhaps a more symbolic pushback among Republican lawmakers. As we know, polling has repeatedly shown that the party is playing defense on the economy when it comes to heading in to the 2026 midterms. So there's a few different threads that we could pull on. If you look at the Republicans that ultimately dissented and went against the president's tariff policies, yes, one of them has often feuded with President Trump. That's Congressman Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky. But a lot of the other ones represent these key battleground districts, and they're facing some pretty tough primaries. And it was interesting to hear some of them explain their reasoning. One lawmaker from Washington state spoke about how they're seeing commerce decline between the U.S. and Canada and border crossings into his state and his district. Another brought up concerns about how President Trump has taken unilateral action when it comes to his tariffs and didn't seek congressional approval, and they wanted to make their vote known in that way. With this said, of course, the White House is largely defending its tariff policies, and the vast majority of Republicans did vote with President Trump's. We're only talking about 6, but it still does mark the strongest sign of political pushback that we have seen so far when it comes ultimately to this tariff policy.
This affordability issue is something that seems like a really strong speaking point for the Democrats here. The Republicans are certainly making some statements, some policy statements about, mortgages and so on and so forth. Is it something they feel like they can get ahead of? Because right now they seem to be playing defense.
Right. There is, we've seen really a flurry of policy proposals out of this White House, perhaps some with more populist tones, right? President Trump's proposals when it comes to credit card interest rates or banning institutional investors from buying single family homes. So we'll have to see what ultimately resonates, because polling has repeatedly shown us that at the moment that economic message isn't resonating with Republican voters. I'd point you to a Gallup poll out just this week that finds that 50% of U.S. adults feel negatively about the U.S. economy. However, I will say that the White House is rather optimistic going into the year ahead. You're going to hear them talk a lot about those expected larger tax refunds coming under the One Big Beautiful Bill, and they are still doubling down on their tariff policies, even as we just saw what happened here in Congress, talking about an expected boost to manufacturing jobs as one example. But Paul, to your point, this vote yesterday actually really marked a defeat for House Speaker Mike Johnson, who tried really hard to not force his members to take a politically fraught vote and get them on the record. Because I have to say, if you're a reporter here in Washington, you get a lot of campaign emails. And after that vote happened, Democrats started sending these emails targeting Republicans in farm states in particular about siding with President Trump's tariff policies. So it's going to be something to watch as its political potency definitely takes us ahead into November.
Absolutely. The other thing I wanted to get the latest on you from is the White House Border Czar Tom Homan saying that he has proposed, and the president has agreed, that the federal surge operation in Minneapolis is coming to an end. Can you give some more color on this?
Well, Scarlett, this actually marks a major de-escalation from the Trump administration as they have tried to refocus and address the unrest that has unfolded in Minneapolis. Now, as you said, the border czar Tom Homan confirming that the surge has ended or will conclude, according to him, but also adding that a small footprint of personnel will remain for a period of time to close out and then transition full command and control back to the field office. So there still is going to be some presence there in a sense, but it does mark a drawback for the Trump administration, which has been under pressure when it comes to the Department of Homeland Security and immigration policies, including here on Capitol Hill. And it's interesting that this is coming from the federal level, because Republicans in Congress have told Democrats that they would like them to get on board with President Trump issuing perhaps more executive actions to address their concerns when it comes to immigration.